and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 410, and today's date is July 8th, 2014, and the title of this episode is The Central Bankers Now Provoking War Everywhere to Cover Up This Economic Collapse. And if we look at every single part of the world and each situation, we can see there is no peace. Absolutely no peace whatsoever. All we're seeing is a push towards war. We see the United States central bankers pushing and provoking each one of these countries. We see Israel now opening up on the Palestinians because of these 3 teens that were killed. Now they're opening up on everyone there. They're not just hitting military, they're hitting homes, and they're killing people there. And again, this is happening in every single place. We look at the Ukraine now. What are we seeing there? We're seeing Poroshenko pushing the war agenda, trying to provoke Putin as best as he can. He wants Putin to do something. They're going in there using the Rand Corporation plan where they're bombarding the people in these regions. They're using airstrikes. They're doing everything they possibly can to make Putin they want Putin to come across the border and make a move. And this way they can say, aha, you see, Russia is invading. And this is exactly what the central bankers want. They are continually pushing this. And we see this in the Middle East with the entire plan of the Islamic State. We can see they're issuing these passports. They're creating their own currency. They're calling that, yes, parts of Syria and Iraq now are the Islamic State, and they want Assad to do something. They want something to happen there, and they're sitting back and they're waiting. They're just waiting it out, and they're formulating their plan, and their plan is to connect the dots and say, yes, the terrorists are being created in Syria, and this is why we have this problem, and this is why we need to get into this area, because really what they want to do in their master plan is to completely separate everything in the Middle East, Sunnis, the Kurds, the Shiites, and this is how their plan is being developed. They've had this plan for quite a while, and they're pushing the agenda. They tried many years now to try to remove Assad. They had the Geneva II talks. That didn't work because the only agenda they had was Assad needs to be removed. And of course, Assad wasn't just going to step down. They decided to take all the Syrian government officials, remove them from all the embassies inside the United States, told them to absolutely just leave and don't come back. They made the opposition the acting government, and you can see everything that they've tried completely backfired on them. And now they are using a different tactic. The goal is still the same. They need to capture and remove Assad because he is causing a huge amount of problems for their major plan. And of course, all of this would prop up the central bankers. It would prop up the U.S. dollar because this way they could separate all these regions. They wouldn't have the fighting. They wouldn't need the drones, because you have to remember, these people inside these countries, these tribes, they are not Al-Qaeda terrorists. They are tribes saying, you know what, we don't want the puppet regime in here. We don't want the central bankers in here. And of course, Congress gave the president permission to go after the Al-Qaeda terrorists. And this is how the Obama administration can use drones on these people, because all they have to do is say they're Al-Qaeda. And of course, ISIL, ISIS, the Islamic State, they are not Al-Qaeda. They're a splinter group. But again, as we know, Obama has been backing them, funding them, giving them military weapons, and all of this has been put into place to cause havoc and chaos in this region. And you can see everything is being provoked here. If they make a move into Syria, they are continually provoking Russia from the other side because they do back Syria. In Ukraine, here they are provoking Russia from another stance. So we can see all of this is happening all around the world. And of course, in Central Africa, we have China on one side, and we have the United States government central bankers on the other, provoking China. We have the Pacific, where we have 60% of the United States fleet out in that area. They're encircling China with military bases, missile silos. We also have the missile shield in Eastern Europe, pointing directly at Russia. So you can see all this has been planned. They're probably most likely following the RAND plan for an economic collapse, and we'll discuss that a little bit later in the report. And we're going to get right into the economic collapse news. And we know that Europe, the Eurozone region, they are suffering pretty bad. Right now, UK manufacturing output hits a 16-month low. A new survey shows Britain's factory output has recorded its weakest reading in over a year, which could affect the economic recovery in the second quarter. Well, this sounds very familiar to almost every single economy that's controlled by the private Western central bankers. The Office for National Statistics released the data on Tuesday, saying production slumped by 1.3% in May, marking the biggest drop in 16 months. The makers of metals, pharmaceuticals, and electronics reported the biggest falls. Official data revealed that Britain's overall economy grew less than the initial estimates. Well, of course, we know this is true. All the countries said, "Oh, we're in this fantastic recovery. We're going to see great strides. It's going to be fantastic." And now everyone is saying, "Ooh, okay, we missed this completely." And of course, now they're downgrading their forecast for the second quarter, and this will continually go forward with every single country, and they'll continually downgrade, and eventually what will happen is they'll come out with this magic number, and then they'll revise it, and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, we completely messed it up, and we had to revise because of some reason or another." And the real reason is they're using manipulated tactics to keep the illusion alive. That's exactly what they're doing. Now, the National Federation of International Business, they are saying that they don't see any improvement in the economy. And they're seeing that sales expectations for small businesses completely dropping. They're seeing good time to expand. No, it's not a good time to expand. And they're actually seeing actual sales drop. So they're seeing everything turning out to be pretty much what we all thought it was going to be, a decline in the economy. And small businesses are looking out there saying, we are not seeing any type of improvement whatsoever. It's all falling apart. And of course, we can see this by the amount of retail stores that have been closing. I mean, Radio Shack 1,100, Staples 225, Coldwater Creek completely closed down, bankrupt, Loehmann's completely closed down, bankrupt, Target closing stores, Best Buy closing stores. We have Crumb's Bake Shop. They made cupcakes. They have about 48 stores. They are all closing. American Apparel, they got a default notice from the lender from Lion Capital already. They are not doing well. So we can see right now from everywhere and everything where we look here, it's not going as planned. The manipulated illusion numbers are separating from what's happening in the real economy. Now we know back probably last year, moving into this year, of course, Goldman was out there telling everyone to sell their gold, and everyone was saying that gold was going to drop, which it did, and then it went up, it came back down. Of course, they're controlling this, but what is very interesting right now is that hedge funds are now buying gold. Demand is now up and prices are defying bearish forecasts. Money managers increased net long positions for a fourth straight week through July 1st, and holdings in exchange traded products are climbing at the fastest pace since 2012. So this tells us something is happening here. Just like we had the indicators of real estate completely falling apart because we saw banks laying off thousands upon thousands of people in the mortgage department back in 2013. Now all of a sudden, these hedge fund investment companies, central banks, countries are starting to buy up gold. Prices have come down. It's time. They can't hold it down forever, and we can see they are making their move, and they're trying to get as much as they possibly can. Now, Walmart is out there, and they're scratching their heads because they can't really understand why spending from everyday people hasn't increased since the unemployment numbers have come down so far. It makes no sense. Well, yeah, it does, because the numbers are manipulated. And you have to remember, those people who had a full-time job now have a part-time job making less money, but they're still considered employed. So what's happening is Their disposable income is completely evaporating. They don't have the same income. And right now it says that U.S. employers may be hiring again, but the job market's recovery is not giving ordinary consumers enough confidence to increase their spending. And this is coming from a top Walmart executive. Bill Simon, the president and the chief executive officer of Walmart, said, "It's really hard to see in our business today that it's gotten any better. It hasn't. It's actually getting worse. When you take full-time jobs and you replace them with part-time work, the economy cannot be sustained. If college graduates cannot come out of college, find a full-time job, and pay off their student debt, save money, spend in retail because they have disposable income, save for a house, we have major problems." And that is exactly what we have right now. We have major problems, and not just here in the United States. In many of the European countries and other countries where the youth unemployment is skyrocketing. This is the foundation of the next generation. It cannot be sustained. It's impossible. And especially with everyone being laid off or underemployed, you're not going to see more spending. You're going to see less because people do not have the same jobs. They're not making the same money. They're unemployed, even though they're calling them, they stop looking for jobs because, they don't want to support their family. They don't want food on their table. They don't want to have vacations. They don't want to be secure in their livelihood. So they just stop looking. It makes no sense. And they're trying to, of course, manipulate all of this to convince everyone this is what's happening. But we really understand that the illusionary unemployment numbers and the illusionary GDP, inflation, and pretty much everything else is just that. It's an illusion. And we're seeing now the real economy is not fitting into this illusion anymore. And the central bankers are starting to, realize this. They knew this time would come. And this is why they are prepping and pushing and provoking war in every part of the world, because they realize they need to start something to cover up this entire economic collapse. Now, yesterday I said that Rick Perry was very surprised that he didn't get a call from Barack Obama because of this whole immigration problem. Well, President Barack Obama has offered to meet Texas Governor Rick Perry, and Rick Perry declined because he said just meeting him on the runway and shaking his hand for a photo op is not going to solve the crisis that they have in on the southern borders. He would like to have a real meeting, a sit-down meeting to discuss what's going on. And of course, Obama doesn't want to do that because his whole entire agenda is to have all these children come across the border. This way they're protected by that law. And it will make it easier for them to put them on Obamacare, show that there's a crisis in the country, pass the immigration bill, give them work permits, have them start to work, and it will try, and what they're trying to do is pump up the system. And of course this is not going to work because this is not how the system works. But our government and the central bankers, they will do pretty much anything to move and push their agenda. And most of the time it does fail. Now, the mayor in Marietta, California is saying, I've never received any calls from the Obama administration, from the federal government. Nobody told me that they were going to be dropping off illegal aliens in my town. And he said, we're a very small town. And, we understand that this is still a destination point where they would like to drop more there. He says, but no one has given us any type of understanding of why they're dropping them here, what we have to do, and we're really in the dark. And it looks like most of the towns are in the dark. And we can see on the map that I put up, if you like to see the map, it's on the X22Report.com site. Just go to the tab where it says Resources. It'll drop down a menu. Just click on the map of the immigrant children, and you can see every day there's more and more towns proposed, more drop-offs in these towns. Some have failed, but it's expanding, it's escalating, it's really not stopping, and they're really pushing this agenda very, very hard. Now, White House spokesman Josh Earnest was asked, what are the specific numbers of the illegal immigrants that are showing up in the court hearings. And of course, as the Obama administration, their answer is always, I don't know. How many people have joined up for Obamacare? What are the exact numbers? Oh, I don't know. How many of these children actually went to the court hearings? I don't know. They never know, because this is part of their plan to deceive, to distract. Their plan and their agenda is to bring them over here. They care less about the court hearings. They want them to be placed in all these communities, hidden around, going to work, joining up for Obamacare on subsidies. This is their entire plan. And listen, I have no problem with people coming into this country. This country was built on people coming from other countries into this country, but not using a covert method and a planned agenda and bypassing all the laws and pulling the guards back from the borders. I mean, this is a little bit extreme, and it's planned, and this is not the way others have been entering the country. This is for a specific agenda, and this is what I object to. Now, of course, President Obama is backing off the plans to send children at the border home faster, and for right now, he's holding off and seeking any new legal authority to send unaccompanied migrants' kids back home faster from the southern border. So he's not even doing anything, and he was never going to do anything. Instead, he's asking for $3.8 billion, and this is what he wants. It seems like a little bit of a blackmail type of scheme to me, where he's having all these children come across the border, and now protected by that law that I mentioned yesterday, and right now, what we're seeing is he's saying, you know, if we need to do anything and help the situation, I need about $3.8 billion, because, you know, we could put more guards there, we can give it to DHS, and pretty much everything. And it looks like the whole thing was a complete setup, and guess what? It was. Now, it looks like the United States is not the only country. The local police, law enforcement agencies are not the only people spying on local citizens. It seems like Australia is also using NSA-style surveillance on their public. Australian law enforcement has been exposed scooping metadata from thousands of mobile phones of ordinary citizens, using the same kind of equipment and methods previously attributed to U.S. police and intelligence agencies. A U.S.-invented technique dubbed tower dump is now enabling Australian police to learn the exact location, establish context, and duration of calls of a chosen mobile device over a certain period of time. A tower dump receives data from multiple towers, all mobile providers using them, thus collecting information on countless mobile phones. And we can see Australia, yes, they found out that they're doing it, but guess what? Most of the countries are doing this now. The private Western Central Bank-backed countries are now spying on their citizens. They need to know who they are in contact with. They need to know who they're speaking to. They're creating social profiles, correlating all the data, and this is exactly what is going on in all these areas. And they're creating these lists, and we know they have these secret lists. Of course, the secret list for people flying came out, and of course the court said it was unconstitutional, because how do you get on there? Most of the people that were on there weren't even terrorists, and you know they have other lists. We just haven't seen them yet, but eventually, guess what? You will see these lists. They will come out, and you have to remember what happened in Ukraine, and you have to remember the puppet regime in Ukraine is controlled by the U.S. government central bankers. And when they were going into the southeastern region, they asked the local police of those people who would be a threat to the puppet regime. Those police handed it over, and those are the people they went after first. So you know they're doing the same thing here, and in Australia, and in the European countries. Now, it seems like the senators are completely clueless about the NSA bombshell, where NSA is spying on everyday Americans and collecting their information, creating social profiles, correlating the data, and making sure they're on a specific list. Senator Lindsey Graham, who sits on the Senate Armed Services, Appropriations, and Judiciary Committees, and is one of the Republican Party's most prominent voices on defense and intelligence issues, wasn't familiar that NSA was even doing this. And he says, I'm looking into it. Dianne Feinstein, same thing. I'm in the process of looking into that situation. And Senator Tom Coburn, a member of Feinstein committee, came out of the Senate Monday votes challenging the veracity of the report, saying the story is not really accurate. Really, you have no idea what's going on. You are not for the people. And if you were truly for the people, you wouldn't have waited for Edward Snowden to come out with this information. The Senate would have done this on their own. Congress would have done this on their own. They would have been investigating to make sure that the people's privacy is secure according to the Bill of Rights. But guess what? They didn't do it. This is how you know they're not for the people. And you could tell by not what they say, but their actions. Now, as we know, the U.S. government is out there telling us that there's these bomb makers who are going to make these stealth bombs, and we have to be scared. They could be implanted into our bodies, or they could be in cell phones. So TSA right now, as you know, is having you power up your cell phone. And really, when you really think of this, and there is a former TSA agent out there describing that the new rule is absolutely ridiculous, and they said they had this directive about 6 years ago. They were just waiting to implement it. And he said, and I agree with this completely, if there is a bomb maker that can make a stealth bomb, and they can implant it into a body or put it into an electronic device, wouldn't you think they would have the know-how on how to make the device turn on? And even if the TSA says, okay, we're looking for these bombs and you have to turn on your device, if they did find one and the device turned on, what would they do if the bomb went off in the terminal? This is not going to help any type of situation. Of course, we know there really isn't a bomb. We know this is all manufactured, and you can tell by everything that they're trying to do, it doesn't even make sense, especially when we have the borders wide open where ISIL and ISIS could be coming across, drug dealers, murderers, who knows? Because when you pull the border guards back, guess what? Everyone just comes through. You can't stop anybody. Now, it looks like the United States right now decided to kidnap the son of a Russian MP, possibly to exchange him for Edward Snowden. And this is what the father is charging. The man was indicted with a computer-related crime by Washington, D.C., and he was snatched up from the Maldives. Roman Seleznyov was detained on Saturday at Mal International Airport, and he was returning to Russia. He was forced by agents of the U.S. Secret Service to board a private plane to Guam to be later arrested, a move which the ministry calls a de facto kidnapping. We consider this incident as a new hostile move by Washington. Again, provoke, provoke, provoke. The MP said that his son has scant computer skills and could not be involved in any sort of hacking whatsoever. Now, of course, they just picked this person up, and who knows, maybe they will try to make a trade, but we see the White House doing many types of these types of actions all across the world. And, you know, they really don't have to say why they're doing it or give a reason. No one questions it, and they're just going around the world telling different countries they have to abide by it or you'll be sanctioned or this, and they're just using threats all over the place. And you can see the countries now are looking at this and saying, you know what? We are stepping away from the dollar. We are stepping away from the tyranny of this government. And again, this is at the end game when they become desperate. They're using everything they possibly can to pretty much control the entire situation, and they just will not be able to control this. Now, in Kiev, the United States State Department has defended Kiev's right to use airstrikes against civilians in eastern Ukraine, explaining that it is defending the country. So let's get this straight. The people of the southeastern region, who were Ukrainian, living there in peace, they have neighborhoods just like everywhere else, kids going to school. They decided that they didn't want to be part of the puppet regime. So they said, all right, we're going to have a peaceful referendum. We're going to vote and say we're not part of Ukraine. They didn't go into the capital or into Kiev and start firing upon them and attacking, throwing bombs. No, they had a peaceful referendum. just like Crimea. And then the Kiev government decided, you know what, we can't stand for this. We're going to have to create an anti-terrorism force and then bring our tanks, our artillery, our paid mercenaries, and go right into this region. And of course, the people who are voting said, well, you know, you're not taking us over. We are going to fight back because we want to be free and apart from this. And then all of a sudden, Kiev started following the Rand doctrine, which said use airstrikes, detain, arrest these people, create internment camps, and you can see all of this is really being pushed hard. And they're firing upon citizens of the country. And the United States says this is okay. But if you look back in Syria, they said Assad was doing the same thing against his own people, and this isn't right. It is wrong, and this is why he needs to be overthrown. So, really, if the United States government central bankers have control of the government, they don't care about the people. If they do not have control of the government, they stick up for the people's rights. And once they get control of the government, then they don't care about the people. This is exactly what we're seeing right now, and you can see that they are really pushing the agenda hard in Ukraine. And right now, Kiev is completely refusing to talk to any of the opposition, the pro-Russian people, the Ukrainian citizens who are fighting for independence. They do not want to talk to them. The only way they'll talk to them is if they just lay down all their weapons. And of course, you know what's going to happen then. Those people will be arrested. Most of the others will be killed. Most of them will be sent to camps. And this is part of the entire plan. Now, Poroshenko, he has approved a plan to seize Donetsk and Lugansk, and Ukraine says they have a nasty surprise in this new push. They're going to go in there hard with airstrikes, and they're really going to push, and they're trying to provoke Russia at the same time. They want Putin to come in there with military because they're hitting, again, pro-Russian people who have Russian origins, and they're trying to force Russia into doing something. And this is their major plan right now. And you also have to remember the IMF, the central bankers, they're calling the shots. They're saying, get Ukraine back, get the southeastern region, get Crimea. You want the money? You better do what we say, and this is exactly what's going on. Now, Kiev right now has shut down the airspace in the southeastern part of Ukraine. The Ukrainian State Aviation Service has shut down airspace in the southeastern part of the country, and the so-called anti-terrorist and in fact punitive operation against pro-independence forces in the region continues. And they're shutting it down. They don't want anyone flying anything over there except, of course, the Ukrainian Air Force that will go ahead and use these airstrikes against the people there. Now, in the Black Sea, what we're seeing is Russia's having their drills, and NATO is having drills in the Black Sea. And right now, the group of NATO ships in the Black Sea has grown to 9 vessels. This is setting a record for the amount of ships in the Black Sea. And again, we have to remember the Montreux Convention says that non-state ships, the countries that do not have ports in the Black Sea, those ships can only stay there for 21 days, and then they have to leave. And we can see that America has brought the Vela Gulf, which arrived early Tuesday. The French have their frigate Surkoff, which arrived on July 4th, and there's 9 NATO ships now in the Black Sea. Now, Kuwait is planning to return its military to the borders of Iraq. They're getting nervous about what's going on, and all of the previous arrangements have been temporarily voided right now. Kuwait sources said the Gulf Cooperation Council have just decided to redeploy army units to the border to protect themselves because they see what's going on, terrorists running around rampant there. We also see the rebellion, the people of the Sunni tribes also rebelling, trying to make a move and take over the country at the same exact time. Now, the United States has brought in more military, and these military advisors are, they're combat ready, and they have been sent to Kurdistan. So right now we have 100 U.S. soldiers in Erbil, the capital of Kurdistan. And they said the Special Operation Force troops established a joint operations center with the Iraqi military. So we have troops in Baghdad and troops now in Kurdistan. Now it looks like the terrorist group, the Islamic State, decided that they're going to use Bitcoin as their trade right now, because the solution to use Bitcoin, it is anonymous, it's decentralized with an extra layer of encryption, calling, mixing, and we can see that they are going to use this, and of course the U.S. government is very concerned about this, looking at Bitcoin and other type of cryptocurrency. They're saying that this is a currency that many terrorists can use, and you can see how they're pushing the agenda. They don't like Bitcoin. They don't like any of this, because why? You cannot be taxed on it. It cannot be controlled. It's not part of the Federal Reserve central bank system. It's separate and apart. So you can see how now they're linking this to terrorism. So those people who have Bitcoins could be considered a terrorist or using it for some terrorist need. And you can see how they're really pumping up this propaganda. Now we understand back in August of 2013, the United States government, UK, France were all out there screaming that Assad used chemical weapons. And at that point we almost went to war. And what has happened lately is that the international authorities authenticated sarin nerve agent inside 2 containers that the Syria regime found in rebel-held territories. And June 14th analysis by the United Nations and the World Chemical Weapons Watchdog confirmed that these cylinders actually did contain sarin. So what we're seeing right now, all of what happened back in August going forward was caused by the rebels. They're the ones who used sarin gas. And you have to remember, the UN ambassadors right now is comparing Assad to Hitler. They are really building up this propaganda. And of course, they're looking at thousands and thousands of pictures saying this is horrific, the amount of torture and what they're doing. And really, most of these pictures are mostly probably from the rebel side. And this is what they're using to convince everybody that Assad equals Hitler. But what's very interesting is Assad won the election by a landslide, and the people were coming out everywhere to vote. So the story doesn't really make sense whatsoever. It only makes sense in the case where they're trying to connect everything and to get into Syria, and they're trying to create this story. Now, North Korea, and this is a report, of course, coming from the corporate media, the North Korea has almost doubled the number of elite hackers over the past 2 years in an effort to launch mass cyber attacks. North Korea appears to have some 5,900 personnel for cyber warfare, and they've been carrying out cyber attacks by establishing overseas bases in countries like China. So you can see what they're doing, and I have to say this, the players are always the same. It's going to be North Korea, Iran, Syria, China, Russia. It's all the same. I mean, Brazil, Venezuela. It's going to be all the same. And what they're trying to do is they need to demonize each one of these countries. So right now we have North Korea ramping up its cyber attack division, because they'll be attacking the United States. They're already blaming Russia. They already blamed China. They're already blaming the Syrian Electronic Army, which is part of Syria and the Assad team. So you can see what they're doing right now. They are laying the groundwork, making sure we understand that the American people, who are pretty much sleeping, but those who are awake understand that these attacks are coming from all of these nations. But we realize that most of them, almost all, are coming from within to make us believe that another country is causing this, and that is the false flag event. Now, the U.S. is asking Germany to tighten airport security after American authorities said they have concerns about al-Qaeda operatives in Syria and Yemen developing bombs that could be placed onto planes. Now, why couldn't the Germans just do this on them, by themselves? I mean, they see the reports out there. Why couldn't they just say, okay, let's increase airport security? Is it because they really don't believe this? But it's very odd that the U.S. has to come to Germany and say, oh, please do this because we have this intelligence and we want to make sure that there are no bombs coming from Germany heading towards other European countries and the United States. And it's very interesting that they had to come out and actually say this. Now, yesterday I talked about the border crisis and how terrorists could be coming across. Well, now experts are out there saying that the border crisis could be the perfect opportunity for the Islamic terrorists looking to sneak sleeper cells into the U.S. It's impossible to say that ISIS will soon be active on our border, but some groups will be, retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters said. The one thing that all of the squabbling jihadi groups in the Middle East and North Africa have in common is they want to strike the U.S. Now, of course, we understand that the United States is not really concerned about this because they realize who the terrorists are, and they are the terrorists, so they don't have to worry about them having ISIS or ISIL coming in because they're already here. They're already set up. They're already pre-positioned. They already know what they're going to do, and this is why they're not worried about this. This is why the borders are completely open. Now, something very interesting that I picked up on here, and you're going to have to go back to my episode 364, and I'll give you the title of the episode. Why is the U.S. State Department shipping explosives to unknown locations? This was back in May of this year. Now, what's very interesting, 294 U.S. diplomatic outposts are on high alert over threats from the Islamic State. Now, let me just explain what's going on here. The Islamic State is saying that if America attacks Iraq, every American embassy in the world will be exposed and attacked with car bombs. If the United States bombs Iraq, every American citizen is a legitimate target. ISIS threatened to plant bombs at every American embassy. Now, in this episode 364, why is the U.S. State Department shipping explosives to unknown locations? I mentioned that these explosives were headed to embassies around the world. Now, it seems very odd today that this comes out where ISIS is saying they're going to explode all the embassies, and we have this evidence that the U.S. State Department was shipping out the explosives. Now, put them both together, what do you get? This was planned. They're getting ready to do something. So if you want to hear that episode, it's Why is the U.S. State Department shipping explosives to unknown locations? That is episode 364. And today, what we're seeing is the Islamic State, which is controlled by Israel, Arab nations, and the United States central bankers. They are saying that they're going to hit the American embassies if there is any type of an attack. Very interesting. You can see how this was all laid out. Now, yesterday we talked about the RAND Corporation, how they made many different types of plans where the U.S. State Department, they use these plans. They are a think tank, and they do have plans here in the United States. The RAND Corporation created an internal study of civil unrest here in the United States. And back in 2008 and 2009, they've created this plan for the civil unrest, and they were urging the United States to create a police force, DHS, to control the situation and have this police force pretty much infiltrate the local law enforcement across the country and have them come in compliance. The study asked several questions. First, is a stability police force necessary? An SPF is a high-end police force that engages in a range of tasks such as crowd and riot control, special weapon tactics, SWAT, and investigations of organized criminal groups. Its focus on high-end tasks makes it fundamentally different from UN or other civilian police, who deal with more routine law and order functions. It is also different from the most military forces, which are generally not trained and experienced to conduct police tasks in a civilian environment. Well, we see that today, don't we? We see all the local law enforcement's coming into compliance, and they are being militarized in SWAT uniforms, tanks, weapons, electronic surveillance equipment, exactly like this plan says. Second, if an SPF is necessary, what should it look like? This includes considering such issues as its objectives, tasks, and size, its speed of deployment, its institutional capabilities, where it should be headquartered in the U.S. government, and how it should be staffed, standing force, reserve force, and hybrid force, and its costs. It is openly admitted that the internal force will be used to quell civil unrest due to massive large-scale terror attacks or economic collapse. So we can see right now they've already created this plan for the collapse or some type of terrorist attack which would lead to the economic collapse. And we can see further that the U.S. expects to have about 20,000 uniformed troops inside the United States by 2011, trained to help state and local law officials respond to some type of terrorist attack or other domestic catastrophe, including an economic collapse. So we can see already the DHS police force has already worked with all local law enforcement. They have received all the equipment they need. They've come into compliance, and this was supposed to be done by 2011. I think they have it pretty much done. They've been buying millions of rounds of ammunition. We can see that they've been training all of these people. They have the equipment, and you can see they have been preparing for this for quite a while. And really, you can see they are getting nervous, they're getting ready, and this is why all of this is being done at this time, because we already know the collapse is coming. We already know they're going to create this false flag event where lights go out, people are going to be rioting, people are going to be upset, banks are going to be closed. They already have it prepared. They've already prepared for this. And you can see by the plan they have, they're continuing with this. And if we can get more information on what they have done since, we will probably see something very different, and it probably expands across many more soldiers, many more people in with this to control what is going to happen. Now, of course, there is another plan, of course, that has to do with the economic collapse. And this has to do with how should they cover up the economic collapse. Rand Corporation, the Department of Defense, has submitted an evaluation report assessing the feasibility of launching a war to pass the current economic crisis. Admittedly, war is the continuation of politics, has always been an economic and political foundation and ultimate purpose. Continued deepening of the U.S. subprime mortgage crisis and economic recession, to a certain extent, it is likely to induce war to achieve the purpose to pass the crisis, to cover it up, to make sure everyone realizes that it wasn't the central bankers, it wasn't the U.S. government who caused this, it was another country because we had to get into war. They created this terrorist attack here, which collapsed the United States, and then we had to go to war. And this is why our economy collapsed. We were trying to improve it, not we, with the central bankers, U.S. government. We were in a recovery. We told you that. Look what this other country, this other group did. And now we have to go to war because look what they did to our economy. And you can see this has been planned from the beginning. They knew they could only keep the system going for as long as they possibly can until other countries, other central banks, other corporations started to lose faith in the dollar. And we're seeing this happen now. And this is why they are out all over the place provoking war, trying to get something started, to convince you that when this event hits, that it was another country, another group, and this is why you need to take your children, your brothers, your sisters, and go fight this war for the bankers. And this is what they're trying to convince us of. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.